solutions in the built environment. My name is Victoria Burrows. I work at Compass VC, which is a venture capital firm investing in early stage startups that help to decarbonize and improve productivity and business resilience across the built environment and manufacturing sectors. And I look after our strategic partnerships and insights for our fund. And we're here today to talk about specifically the built environment part of that work. The built environment has a multi-trillion-dollar problem. Actually, it has several multi-trillion-dollar problems, but the one we're here to focus on today is how we're going to solve its massive carbon appetite. For that, we need solutions to help increase the efficiency and drastically reduce emissions, and in emerging markets alone, that requires trillions of investments per year. No simple challenge, and the big issue we have is about scale. Firstly, we should all be aware that the built environment is responsible for around 37% of carbon emissions globally, and we're going to double the footprint that we already have by 2060. So if we don't change the way we do things now, we are also going to double that impact. From the way that materials are made, to the way that buildings are designed, the way they are built, the way they're valued, the opportunity to reuse and refurbish, deconstruct, and enable a circular economy. All of those phases that I've just described have multiple challenges, multiple stakeholders, multiple moving parts, and value chains to navigate, millions, if not trillions, of problems that need solutions. All of which in a sector that is notoriously resistant to change, and in most countries have woefully inadequate regulations and building codes. Although there is some glimmer of hope, and we know that the sector is finally getting some attention in that space. The codes are changing, and the industry will have to change whether it likes it or not. And in order for that to be effective, we need to equip all stakeholders with the tools and the solutions to drive decision-making that supports low-carbon choices on every project and every existing building all around the world. We need more solutions, scaling the ones we already have and the ones not invented yet. According to the IEA, 40% of emission reductions will come from solutions that are either not yet invented or not yet commercially viable. The early stage venture capital market has funded an enormous pipeline of promising and highly innovative companies over the past few years, many of which will ultimately graduate to a growth stage where they need extra capital, injections of capital. We have improving valuation climates and robustness of underlying innovation, and also increasing demand signals that gives massive potential for the best phase of growth stage investing that we've seen in years. But there is a growth equity gap from those startup solutions that we identify to full-scale deployment of an estimated $26 billion. So since it's Finance Day, we also need to focus on how we're going to finance the scaling of those solutions so that they can have the promise that they have, the full potential, and deliver on that potential, and deliver a significant dent in emissions, and also improve the adaptation of the entire sector. We desperately need to move from promises to progress, from commitments to action, from why to how. And to inspire us along that journey, we have some players in this space with us today, working to identify, back, deploy, scale, and enable the right solutions to help us get there. So we're going to start with our first panel, and I'd like to introduce Moritz Schaefer, Director and Expert for IKI projects for Build ME and Cool Up from Guidehouse. Welcome, Moritz. And we have Dr. Majed Mahmood, Acting Executive Director and Technical Director, Lead Renewable Energy Advisor for the Regional Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. Welcome, gentlemen. Oh, I have your mic here. Okay, great. We're going to persevere with the mic issues, so please bear with us. So I'm going to first start by asking you to introduce yourselves and how your work is supporting the deployment of solutions to this enormous challenge. Perhaps with you, Moritz.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for the invitation, and thanks also for the organization here in this building and cooling pavilion. My name is Moritz Schäfer. I'm a director in our energy sustainability and infrastructure segment at Guidehouse. Guidehouse is a global consultancy working on the energy transition. And I want to use the opportunity here today and this panel to present some of the work we've been doing for the last 8 years, I think. So we started in 2016 in a series of ICI-funded projects. So that's projects of the International Climate Initiative. I think we have a slide, if we can put that on. So the first project is called Build Me, and it looks at building efficiency. Yeah, you can't see too much, but there's not much information. It's more a bit a collection of logos. So we started with a Build Me project in Egypt, Jordan, and Lebanon. We have a project on sustainable cooling, which is called Cool Up, in the same region, and also includes Turkey. And we have a new project called MENA Links, which looks at more the grid side of things. And the Build Me project, I want to go into particular because I think that's of most interest here for the discussion. That's been quite a journey, I would say, and we had the approach, what you said, moving from from challenges to solutions and to action. So we started with a large series of round tables. We conducted, I think, more than 4,000 interviews with different stakeholders and people on the ground to really identify where the challenges are. And we did see, of course, that there are plenty of challenges, be it in the in financial, in the technologies, policy and regulation. Many of these countries either had building codes in place, but they were not enforced, so they didn't, or they didn't exist at all. What we then did is we started to provide tools. We started with a typology of buildings and provided tools. Maybe we'll go into detail on those later. I don't want to talk too much here. And really try to provide tangible results also for the financial sector to invest in energy efficient buildings. Maybe I'll stop here and pass the mic.
Same question to you, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to this important session. And in fact, I'm proud with the partnership that we have with Guidehouse under different projects as a regional partner. RCREE is an intergovernmental organization that is based in Egypt and serving 17 Arab countries. And among these, of course, are the MENA countries that benefits from this, I would say, several projects that we are having. Sorry, I have to put this closer. Yeah, sorry. Okay. For RCREE, we work on several layers, and we collaborate through different projects that, whether under Build Me or Cool Up or MENA Links or the three projects. And here, I believe our main intervention is translating what was stated by the countries, the beneficiary countries, as strategies into concrete measures in their national action plans, and then translating these national action plans into implementation on the ground through collaborating with national stakeholders, different actors, community, etc. So having these three layers that we are getting the know-how, the knowledge, etc. from Guidehouse, we got also customization of the tool, having best available technologies, typology, and all the technical details supported from the expert there. And then we are trying to bridge the gap, how to link this to the existing action plans. And at the regional level, we have worked a lot in developing the strategies and action plans for the region. And frankly speaking, the building sector has been the weakest chain. Energy efficiency in general for industry is working good, somehow relatively good. In I would say in other sectors we can discuss, but in the building sector this is the most retarded, I would say, sector. And in general, if you look into the MENA region, you will find that we are the only, and I mean the only region that has increased the energy intensity over the past 30 years. All other regions have improved in terms of energy intensity, meaning the share of energy per GDP, per $1 of GDP is increasing, although energy efficiency indicators highlight that we need to get this down. The share of energy for each $1 of the GDP should be less with time. But this means that the region is still developing. And if you think about the example of Egypt, for example, where we are collaborating a lot, if you look into the example of Egypt, you will find that Egypt is planning to build 40 new cities. 40. And 16 of them are with 1 million citizens living there. And till now, they have excellent energy efficiency code. Excellent. But it has never been implemented except for few pilots. You can count on one hand, two hands, I'm sorry. Codes are there, but they are not enforced, they are not implemented, and this is a case for several MENA countries. And there are several reasons behind that. One of the reasons is the complexity of the code itself. It's a very good academic textbook, but when you go into practicality, it is hard to implement. So having tools like what is provided here by the project, like BuildMe, or templates for action plan, like what is provided under Kulab and other collaborators in this domain, helps us to quantify what was difficult based on the code, that's first of all. And then part of the intervention model is, in fact, to bring the stakeholder into an open discussion, an open dialogue, highlighting where they would like, how to start, first of all, because somehow we are starting from scratch there. And the engagement, for example, of the housing and building research centers in the countries that we are working with have been instrumental in ensuring that the tool is being adopted at the local level. And a further step that was facilitated is the introduction of the tools to the banking sector, the financial sector. And here I mean both the IFIs that are working as development partner in the countries, or the local banking institutions. And in Lebanon and in Egypt under BuildMe, we have the endorsement that this is the tool that was created under BuildMe, the online tool, would be used for estimating the energy efficiency and approving the loan. So this would be the technical, I would say, measure for accepting giving a loan to the developer of the building. Another area of intervention is moving hand in hand with the consultants and seeing what are the best available technologies in the market that they can resort to use in the building itself. So not applying every and each element on the building code, but trying to find what is feasible and what can work. And we have a real case that we try to implement each and every single action in the code, and the cost of the building in Egypt doubled. But when we applied only measure that costed 5 to 10%, we had 30 to 40% saving. And these are simple measures. For example, white roofs, for example, orientation, better window to wall ratios, using right materials, etc. So they are not that much cost. And another step is having this sort of policy briefs and guidelines and reports highlighting the potential in each country. And these were very much needed outputs, because we are giving a message to the politicians that please look into this sector while you are thinking about energy transition. Please, when you are developing the new cities, we have an offering to you that would make a lot of economic sense to the country. There are plenty of, I would say, actions that can be done at the local, regional, and national level. Finally, I conclude here.
Okay.
Finally, enhancing the implementation capacities of the national institutions. And this is, for us, like the foundation for every action. We cannot think of using the tool, the online tools, without having a computer. Can you think of that? When you think about the licensing process in some of the local municipalities in rural areas and in villages, they are just reviewing the documents. They are not doing any calculations. When you look into the consultant, they are doing standard business as usual, typical building design. So by helping them and empowering them with the tools, not only the knowledge. The knowledge, we can do this a lot, but empowering them with convincing the decision makers that we need to have some smart solutions on the fingerprints of these employees, I would say, and the governmental stuff. So enhancing the implementation capacity in terms of skills, knowledge,
Yeah.
but also in terms of hardware, tools, software is really cornerstone of our success there.
Thank you.
These are the main starting ideas, and they can work.
Of course, yeah. I'm so glad that you mentioned green skills there, because that is a huge challenge, right? We can have the perfect building codes, we can have all of the materials and all the tools that we need, but if we can't actually implement them, then that's a huge challenge to overcome. And I'm delighted to hear that the business model is stacking up with some of those low cost, low tech solutions. The implementation of energy efficiency first. It's what the whole world has mentioned, and I'm sure the issue of not using digital tools and still working on that paper-based solution is not limited to your region. I have to say, I think probably buildings in Europe are still being built with with paper designs, so I wouldn't be too concerned about that. Back to you, Moritz. I'd like to ask, you mentioned some of the tools. I'd love you to share a bit more about those in detail, please, and perhaps how you can also envisage replicating the success of some of your projects and work so that we can help overcome some of the challenges that Dr. Mahmoud set out just there.
Yes, absolutely. So, as I mentioned in the beginning, we based this tool on a very complex set of data that includes for the region, for each individual country, the different building typologies in different regions. It considers age. It considers how the building envelope. So it considers a lot of factors, and there's a project website, buildings-mina.com, where you can have all this information downloaded. It's everything is transparent. It's really a complex process, but it's all there. And this is the basis then for the energy performance tool, which calculates how much savings you can achieve with different measures, and not only the energy savings, but also the energy costs, which I think is important. And that was the foundation for our work together with banks, and especially the EBRD, which I would like to mention because they have become a partner in this project. We were discussing, and they said, well, we would like to invest in the region, we would like to invest in energy efficient buildings, but they have to be at least 20% below standard baseline buildings. But that data didn't exist.
Right.
Yeah, so they couldn't. And this tool is now the basis for it. And when you ask for scale up, I mean, we're still in the process of starting. We are on that basis issuing energy performance certificates. That was a big discussion in the session here before, also as a basis to drive a demand. And we have a first EPC now issued in Egypt. We have some on the way in Jordan. So we are moving ahead, and there's a couple more in the pipeline. So we're very proud of having achieved that. It's an energy performance certificate, which is comparable to what we know in Europe, for example. So financing decisions or buying decisions can be based on that information. And I think that there is a huge potential to scale that up and to drive this demand for green buildings, both for investors but also for people renting or buying houses. And that can not only be scaled up within the region, but of course not in these 3 countries, but in the larger region. I mean, the possibility is there, of course. The data needs to be adapted, but I think there's a huge potential to do that. Maybe also one point to the skills that are needed, because I mean that is essential, that the people know how to use these tools and how to build these energy efficient buildings. And what we've been doing is we have applied train the trainers concept for people in different sectors. So we've been working with project developers, we've been working with banks, with architects, so all kinds of different stakeholders that are involved in the process to train them on the tool. And until now we have trained more than 750 people, and to have that sustained, it's a train the trainers concept, right? We've certified trainers to continue that process, maybe even after the project ends.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much to both of you. I think it sounds like we need an army of trained professionals to help deliver some of the projects and solutions that you've mentioned, to make sure these tools are super effective, and ultimately that knowledge can influence financing decisions, which I think is a really important point to end this conversation on. So thank you very much. I would just, before you get down, ask if there's anything, if you have one ask from this audience of engaged people desperate to know about how we scale solutions in the built environment, one request from the industry that maybe someone in this audience might be able to help with or be able to connect you with, anything that you'd like to give as your call to action today?
Well, one request.
Yep.
Okay. The request is to highlight the benefits.
Okay.
Strongly highlighting the benefits of transitioning to efficient and cooler buildings, by the way.
Yes.
I forgot to speak about national cooling action plans, for example, and the importance of cooling sector. If we just deliver the right message to the right persons who can influence the future, then we'll be successful.
I agree. I think we have a communication problem in our sector. Thank you. And to you, Moritz.
Well, my ask would basically, let's all work together. I think cooperation is important. I think that became clear. We need all hands on deck. We all need to work together. The building sector cannot be solved just by energy efficient technologies itself.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that's my ask.
Brilliant. Well, that's a perfect segue into what we're going to talk about next. So thank you so much to both of you. Little applause, please, for our excellent opening speakers. Thank you so much. I'd now like to invite Nidhi Baiswar, Senior Director of Sustainability and Climate Leadership at JLL. Oh, I think we need to, here we go, to open up our next segment, which is about solutions and how to finance them. So over to you, Nidhi.
Thanks, Victoria. Hi, everyone. Really nice to be here and good to see you all. My name's Nidhi Baiswar and I work as a Senior Director for... Better now? Yeah, okay. My name's Nidhi Baiswar and I work as Senior Director for Global Sustainability and Climate Leadership at JLL. For those of you who don't know JLL, we are a global company, Fortune 500 company, over 200 years old, and we are a leading commercial real estate advisory firm and also investment management. We help clients buy, sell, operate, manage, build, retrofit, and invest in properties from different sectors. So we look after the commercial real estate, retail, offices, hotels, residential, you name it, and we would be in that sector. Our purpose is to shape the future of real estate for a better world. And we help our clients, our communities that we work with, the people that we work with, see a brighter way by using the most advanced technology and, of course, creating better spaces for our clients, decarbonizing their portfolio and buildings, and so on. So when we are looking at decarbonizing solutions for our clients, there are lots of things that we can do for them, and every building is bespoke, so we do as much as we can. But there are some things that we have to rely on the external stakeholders or external organizations. There are technologies that are available outside of JLL, for which what we do is we invest in or finance these organizations who are producing these products that would be useful for our clients when we're looking at their buildings to decarbonize them. Now, there are two models inside JLL on the basis of how we help finance these organizations. The first one is called JLL Spark Ventures. Now, this organization, or this is within JLL, a business model, a business that invests in new startups, early startups, that are looking into different sort of themes like concrete or construction technology, ESG, different tools around data. They're looking at future of work and so on. So there are different themes that these organizations are producing, different products or different areas of advancement in decarbonization, and JLL Spark would invest in them. So this is the traditional way of looking at it. The other model, though, is very, very unique, very different. It's small, but it is very impactful. This initiative that we started is very recent. We started in 2022, and we've only it's only been 3 years that we are in operation. It is a charity called JLL Foundation, and what this charity does is offers zero interest loans to organizations that are producing products that are friendly for the climate and obviously remove carbon from the atmosphere or are looking at carbon reduction. So overall, this JLL Foundation looks into financing, providing zero interest loans for these organizations. They do a lot of things, and there are various different companies that we've invested or we've supported so far. There's a video. I'll stop here and I'll let you see how they do it. Thank you.
Real estate's transition to net zero requires more than innovative thinking. It also needs significant amounts of funding, and right now, that's a missing piece of the puzzle in our industry.
JLL Foundation is a charity dedicated to impacting climate change now and in the future. Our mission? To drive lasting positive climate impact globally. We provide catalytic capital to climate-impacting startups, focusing on pre-seed and seed stage companies. We're filling a crucial gap in early-stage funding, especially for diverse founders who often face barriers to traditional investment. Our unique model? Zero-interest loans to startups. The return funds get reinvested into new loans, creating a virtuous cycle. The startups we support tackle decarbonization challenges across the real estate lifecycle. Take Kenya's Cubic, which is turning plastic waste into low-carbon buildings. Minus Materials, who produce carbon-negative cement using algae. Invent Wood, which harnesses the strength of cellulose to create a low-carbon building material that outperforms steel. Mycocycle, whose team is training fungi to transform building waste into low-carbon raw materials. KitSwitch, that supplies integrated modular interiors converting disused buildings into low-cost housing. They're a snapshot of the startups supported by JLL Foundation. We're extending our impact by building a network of like-minded investors. Find out how our approach to impact investing enables startups to grow and thrive.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for that, Nidhi. I'd like to invite you to join us on stage with our other speakers who I'll now invite up to join you. We have Hugh Garnett, Real Asset Lead from the Institutional Investors Group on Climate Change, and Peter Hirsch, Head of Sustainability from 2150. Welcome to you all. So Now that we have been inspired by that video from JLL Foundation, I'd love to just firstly ask you guys in particular if there's any startups or trends within the industry, within this space that you're seeing at the moment that you are particularly excited about. I'd love to just give a quick shout out to a co-investment that we at Compass have with JLL Spark actually in EcoWorks, seeing as you mentioned JLL Spark. EcoWorks is a serial renovation company from Berlin in Germany that creates off-site constructed new facades and roofs for creating a sort of new skin around existing buildings to help improve their efficiency. So great to be working with JLL Spark on that. So perhaps you first, Hugh? What gets you excited? There we go. Try again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, is that better? Perfect. So yeah, I'm not going to go for a new technology. I'm actually going to go for an existing technology because a lot of the technologies we have or we need to decarbonize the built environment actually already exist. So I'm going to go for the heat pumps. Really need to see these expanded out, the use of these, particularly in the global north. Currently they only account for 10% of heating energy demand. So there's a that's very small. We need to see that scale massively. I think by 2030, if we need to be in line with IEA targets, we need to see that triple. So we need to see that rise to 30% of energy demand. So that's going to be my piece. Not a new technology, but scaling existing technology. And obviously there are a lot of barriers as well, which we'll touch on to uptake of that. But yeah,
of course, absolutely.
Peter.
Thank you, Peter. Yep.
So every time you change it takes a little bit of time.
Okay.
We got you.
Okay.
Try
Yeah.
it.
This is why. Okay. Now. All right.
Yeah, that was good. Now it's gone.
Okay.
Now we're good.
All right.
Keep it there.
So I'm Peter. Capital Fund 2150. We focus on urban sustainability. This is helping cities decarbonize, become more resilient, address their most pressing environmental concerns. We see buildings as a critical vector for achieving our goals, both in terms of wider economic resilience, as well as the goals of the Paris Agreement. And I think one of the trends that we're seeing, I should also mention that we're an early stage investor, sort of seed to Series B, early stage companies that are just about to scale, and then we come in and help them see through that journey. And one of the trends that we're seeing, going off to the previous point, was that there's a lot of business models now that are helping to bring these mature technologies into the built environment. Because even though we have heat pumps, we have PV, we have chargers and batteries, the exact mechanism for how you as a homeowner or a building operator might actually get those equipment into your building is still not perfectly figured out, both from a financing and from an actual installation standpoint. So we've invested in a number of companies and seen even more companies in this space that are helping to facilitate that pathway, either through the installation themselves, the financing, ultimately to accelerate the uptake of these technologies. And going to your point, we need to get these things into our buildings as rapidly as possible, but it's something that needs to be able to be make economic sense, and it's something that needs to also be easy for the building owner or the homeowner, and that's where we're hoping to see a lot of innovation on the business model side that venture capital funds like ours can invest in.
Could I just press you on anything like really specific, anything within your portfolio that you can tell us about that's helping to deploy?
So we've invested in this one company, 1,5, 1,5. It's mostly based in Germany, but it's also operating around the rest of Europe. So what they're doing is exactly what I was just mentioning, that if I'm a homeowner, I want to install a heat pump, how do I know exactly which one to choose? How am I going to have something reliable? If something breaks down after I install, am I going to have someone there that's going to be able to see through any of the operational complexities that come from switching my energy systems? They are providing not only the installation, some of the and the overall maintenance of that equipment. They're also helping any of those customers that then install these heat pumps, chargers, PV systems to have their such a way that it can save as much money and be as energy efficient for the user as possible. So this is demand side management. This is now coming online and something that we're really excited to see be able to peak shave across the entire grid, and done through this distributed use of assets.
Thank you. Sorry for putting you on the spot there, but a great solution to help overcome some real headaches there for building owners. Nidhi.
Well, some of the examples you've already seen in the video, but the trends that are upcoming in the real estate world that we're seeing are around embodied carbon and operational carbon. So when it comes to embodied carbon, what we're seeing is circularity has become a theme now when it comes to newer products. So on screen, when you saw from JLL Foundation, we've provided loan to this company called Cubic. They're based out of Kenya and they operate around in the region. And what they did is extracted plastic and you reuse that plastic to create building products like panels and bricks. And the beauty of this is they're not just reutilizing the waste coming out, but what they're doing is the product is like a Lego. So it fits one on top of the other, so it negates the use of concrete or steel when it comes to construction. And these products are quite sturdy and reusable, and when it comes to the strength, it does achieve what you've got to achieve for that particular sector. So overall, there are loads of, when it comes to the venture world, I'm sure you get so many brilliant ideas when you're talking to different companies, but the ideas that are scalable and then they can be implemented from one building to another, these are the ones that are really, really useful, and I think we are quite interested in exploring more with them. So yeah, I think circularity is a trend, and lots of products coming out in the market that promise that, but very few actually achieve those targets.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we should say that I mentioned earlier how many challenges we have as a sector. Like, I just touched on them, but for every phase of that, let's say low carbon cement is a solution that goes into concrete, that goes into buildings. It's one of, I wouldn't even know how to put a number on it, how many materials goes into a building and then how many times we build, right? You really have to be thinking about those in terms of multiplying factors. And for those not particularly familiar with the process of venture capital, we do review hundreds, if not thousands, of startups a year, and it is an incredibly collaborative space. Sometimes we may not be able to invest in those particular startups, and we know some of our ecosystem might be interested in them. So we do a lot of shared deal flow and co-investments together. But one of the biggest things we need to know is how to take those thousands of solutions we look at a year into the ones that we put the money behind. We've all got multi-million dollar, euro grants funding available to us to put into these startups, and we need to know from the sector what are those biggest challenges to help you overcome them and be able to make those investments. So speaking to those challenges, I know you all work with investors to Hugh, and you have clients, JLL, and even Peter with some of the partners, and as part of Urban Partners, right? We should perhaps mention. So can you perhaps talk a little bit more to some of those challenges that you're hearing, in addition to the trends from the startup space? What are the challenges in both the sector in deploying some of those startups, most importantly, because that's a huge challenge to scale, and what we can do to help them overcome that? So first to you, Hugh.
Happy to go. So I think so Victoria just mentioned that we're a part of this wider investment platform called Urban Partners. So you can imagine 2150 is the sort of venture arm, and then there's a real estate private equity arm called NREP that's building the actual assets. So there's the places, and then there's the solutions. And you'd think that a venture capital firm that's trying to find solutions for the built environment would make it very easy to then use that technology and then have it move into our assets on the private equity and real estate side, the physical buildings. But in terms of this deployment, there really are still challenges, even when you have an integrated model like ours. So we have been successful in a number of these instances, but this comes down to risk and technological maturity. you have to be absolutely sure that the technologies that we're investing in are going to deliver the types of savings and have even the basic documentation that any other sort of business as usual product would have on the market. And this is something that by working on the maturity curves of our own technologies and the wider technologies sort of in this venture space, it'll help institutions like NREP, being the private equity side of Urban Partners, to use these solutions more rapidly and have a lot more comfort. So I think, yes, there's a lot to be done in terms of making sure that a very, very conservative and traditional industry, which is this buildings construction space, both in new construction and retrofit, has a lot of assurance that whatever it's going to be bringing into the built environment will deliver from mostly like a technical standpoint, would be the point that I'm making.
We need that confidence in the solutions as well, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm going to take it up a level. I think, so for me, a lot of these solutions are around energy efficiency. And I think, the fact is energy efficiency just isn't very sexy for institutional investors. And, it's not the same as tripling renewables, the goal we had from COP28 last year. Obviously we had the doubling energy efficiency announcement as well. And, it's really clear that renewable space is obviously getting a lot more focus from an investor perspective. And I think that's, it's something that we really need to address, and we really need to scale the solutions. And I think there's sort of two issues for investors in the way we see it. There's obviously the barriers to investing in the tech. Obviously we have the VC firms here as well, but those companies eventually need to attract that institutional capital, and we really need to see those solutions scale and provide that opportunity. And I think the second piece, which is really where I think a lot of the challenges come, is again in that installation piece. And when you look at it from an institutional perspective, we have large pension funds, asset managers with really large portfolios, and there's a lot of challenges with ensuring that those portfolios get up to speed and have that sort of energy efficiency that we're really looking for. One of those is purely it's the cost of doing it. It's really expensive. If you have a 800 asset portfolio, as some of our members do, looking to prioritize which buildings you retrofit first, that's really important. And I think even within that, there's a lot of challenges around data. We've obviously heard that on this stage already quite a lot, and earlier in some of these events. And the veracity and the reliability of that data, and even obtaining that data, is really challenging. And that's something that we really want to see change, because that not only is affecting the sort of the retrofit of buildings. When you look at that sort of asset portfolio level, it's also sort of stopping the creation of new products, because if you can't measure what you're looking to, if you can't compare or you can't measure what you need to change, then you can't really create new products off the back of it. And what we really need to see is new products that will drive change at scale. And then we can probably also go into probably quite a lengthy conversation around the policy barriers that we're seeing in this space as well. But I'll let someone else talk as well, Nidhi.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
I think for us, with JLL Foundation, the companies that we provide loan to, we don't quite deploy them on our projects, because there's a difference in what JLL Foundation does. They operate independently. They're not part of JLL, as in when it comes to releasing the numbers and so on. So, but although when it comes to JLL Spark Ventures, we have a vested interest in the organizations that we finance, and their products are deployed on the clients, or on the buildings that we work with with our clients. Now, most of the times, the big question that comes from the client when we are suggesting a product is the product tested in the market? How old is it? Is the data really reliable? Have you tested it with any other clients, so we can then use that as a case study and then deploy it? And that is a very big challenge, because when there is a super good product that does exactly what you want, and for the client to reach their emissions reduction, it will exactly do that, but the client wouldn't want to use it because it's not been tested, it's not old enough, and it's just not there. And when it comes to them, so I think the big challenge for the industry, as you rightly said, is that we are such slow adopters, and the challenge is for us really to convince the client that this product is something that they should be investing and they should be deploying, and we take the ownership and the risk behind it because we've invested in it and we know what the product can do and deliver, and we trust the value of the product. So I think that is a very big barrier and a challenge for us as professionals in the industry to bring it out more and to make the clients trust our judgment and our investment in these organizations.
Absolutely. Thank you.
No.
She did. All right, brilliant. Well, Hugh, you mentioned policy, right? We've just been talking about the drivers or the demand challenges from the private sector. I'm completely with you, Nidhi. We've done our homework, right, by the time we invest in one of these solutions. So we truly believe in its potential to help solve a massive challenge. And yet we know, even after successful pilots, right, sometimes you'll find startups have a successful pilot within a company, everybody's happy, and it just can't get further. And so we really need to be building up that confidence in the market. And I think that's going to be one of my big takeaways from today. So thank you. So if we can't rely on the private sector, Hugh, to create that demand signal, as much as we're trying and putting this money into where it needs to be, what do you think could be those, what could be those policy enablers? And perhaps you could start with what those policy barriers are currently.
So I think one of the barriers we're seeing, I think, is uptake, particularly in the residential space. That's where a lot of the change needs to happen, particularly in Europe. And I would say actually that renovation of residential is a massive problem. We're not seeing uptake as quick as we need. And I think, in terms of looking at that government support that is in place, that is a real enabler. We need to see much better grants, even sort of blended finance. Blended finance we normally talk of in sort of emerging markets, but it's not just for emerging markets. We need to see that for developed markets as well. Better use of national infrastructure banks, etc., to really help de-risk these projects and allow it at scale. We're not really going to achieve our goals if we renovate houses on a case-by-case basis or one-by-one. We really need to create those mechanisms that allow for retrofit at scale. And in order to do that, I think we probably need those blended finance mechanisms that allow and get institutional capital comfortable with taking that risk on what is largely new products. So if we're looking at that resi space, these are new products that need to be created to do that, and I think that's really, really important. And then, I guess another thing that, I think that's probably it from the policy barriers. From
well, maybe what about, in terms of getting that institutional capital and getting those institutional investors excited on something that you also said isn't sexy? Do we need those sticks, right? Is it that, and obviously there's been some massive improvements or at least there's been some, I wouldn't say improvements yet, signals towards better policy coming, particularly in Europe. Is that enough of a demand signal to help release that capital, or do we need more?
I think we probably need more. I think, we're certainly trying to work with our members on tackling that energy efficiency piece and alluding to the doubling energy efficiency sort of aim over the next 12 months or so. We'll be looking to see how we can work with some of our institutional investors to look to develop an approach to that. How can investors attribute their contribution to that goal? So, investors really want to. People are doing work in this space, right? But I think we really need to see targets being set and action being taken and getting investors to really sort of highlight what they're doing in that space. So we'll be looking to work with some of our members on sort of how we can develop guidance, support on really attributing how you're contributing to that goal, because it's hard.
Yeah.
The metrics are a lot different than they are for something like renewables, where you're looking at increased capacity generation. It's quite easy to develop those metrics, but for energy efficiency, which is it's much more challenging. It's much more invasive in terms of people's homes, etc.
Yeah.
And also on the commercial side as well, you can't just go into an office building necessarily and retrofit it straight away. There are leases in place. You need to wait until you have the ideal time. It's costly. How are you going to fund it? Where's that capex going to come from?
Yeah.
There's obviously the split incentives idea as well, where obviously you're having invested in that, you're not getting the benefits of those changes and improvements in energy efficiency. So it's clearly something that we need to address there as well.
Yeah, I was hearing some statistics this morning about if we were to implement a carbon price or a carbon tax like across the board, what that would mean like immediately overnight for jobs, for investment, and I think suddenly some of those issues would disappear quite fast. So maybe we need to be looking into some quite drastic measures like that. Peter, we've talked a little bit about retrofit. So how about new buildings, advanced materials, anything in that space?
100%. So I think you made this point actually yesterday on public procurement. There's a lot that the spending power and the sort of aggregate power that governments can do to advance the uptake and deployment of these new materials. So in the US, the Federal Buy Clean initiative has been really an accelerant for new types of making concrete and cement. Hopefully that's something that continues. But those are really important ways that show that there's a lot of trust in these products and someone that can really test this at scale. So ultimately these issues that we see with the private sector maybe being a little bit cautious about bringing these things on in their pilots, the government's going to help to assuage those concerns to their own procurement efforts. But then another, you mentioned carrots and sticks as well. So I think the other way to think about this too is also on the stick side of things, there certain, target setting frameworks that ask for a certain level of energy efficiency or certain emissions performance of a building by a certain year can really create financial incentives for those who are operating or investing in these buildings. And to be more specific, for things like EPBD or in Denmark or in Sweden, where there's actual embodied emissions limits, we are seeing lenders provide lower interest rates to real estate developers who have higher performance buildings. In Denmark or Sweden specifically, because you're coming in lower than even the regulation stipulates on embodied emissions, they know that building is going to be easier to sell down the line, so they know it's a less risky asset. So that way you can get a slightly lower interest rate on your loan as you try to build that building to a slightly greener standard. So I think with these policy frameworks actually in place, you can start then creating these market mechanisms that will create the type of financial incentives that the private sector would chase.
Yeah. Thanks. Anything to add, Nidhi?
Well, I'll just say that I think regulations, like you rightly said, carrot and stick, something similar to what New York has got in Local Law 97, where it set thresholds for energy efficiency performance for every building type. And if you're going above that, you then end up paying carbon tax or penalty in that sense. And we're working with a lot of clients where their buildings are going to face millions and millions of dollars fine every year, and the fine only increases if you don't take any action. I think this is driving those energy efficiency measures in that region, where clients are now aware that they have to either pay for those taxes or penalties or pay for the capex works that is needed to upgrade their building to become better and energy efficient. So I think they do help in a way, but then who knows the future of Local Law 97?
Yep.
Having said that, it's now in action. It's a city-level initiative.
Yeah.
So not every city is implementing that same measures, but they are replicating it from what we can see in America. Different cities have taken up those kind of initiatives. But again, I think overall there needs to be a big push when it comes to regulations. Companies have taken their own initiatives and set targets, science-based or otherwise, and they've got deadlines coming up in 2025, 2030, and they need to act. So I think that momentum is there, but it needs a big push in that sense for innovation to be driven, really.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, sure. Please.
build on that regulations piece. This is so important. The lack of consistency in the regulations is really, particularly in Europe, is really sort of inhibiting action from investors. So, for example, so, for example, looking at some of the metrics that investors use, so looking at energy use intensity, there's 16 different definitions across the EPBD, SFDR, and the EU taxonomy. So you cannot compare like for like, and that's really challenging. We really need, I know we hear it a lot, harmonization of standards, harmonization of regulations is really, really important, because without that, we can't create the products that investors will use and develop to really drive that capital to the places that it needs to be going. And actually, we're looking to work with the likes of JLL and LaSalle Investment Management on really looking to address some of those indicators to really sort of drive that sort of, from an investor perspective, understanding what are the key indicators that they need, how can we get consistency across the regulations from an industry perspective, and really use that as a form to then essentially lobby the regulators to really get that standardization and say, look, this is what industry want, this is how industry is measuring it, let's be consistent so we can really drive and allocate capital where it needs to go.
We're back harmonization. I was thinking about harmonization of standards and how we're back to making it sexy again, but thanks, Hugh. Just because you mentioned Local Law 97, Nidhi, I'm going to tell everyone, and sorry for those who've heard it already, but I'm going to tell everyone I meet at COP. Yes, Local Law 97 is a challenge. It is going to mean huge amounts of those fines for people that have, particularly with huge portfolios of buildings over 25,000 square feet, which is the size that it starts at. There are these carbon limits and thresholds that will get tighter every 5 years. So these fines are really quite significant, and they're set at $267 a ton. There is an allowance for offsets of up to 10%, but it's the same amount, $267 per ton. And we were at a roundtable in New York recently, where the City of New York Department of Buildings announced the creation of a fund to take the money that's generated and put it into the energy efficiency upgrades of social housing that doesn't fall under Local Law 97, which I'm personally super excited about. And as you say, hopefully if that is a success, then it would serve as potentially a model for other cities to follow. But more importantly for us as investors, it provides that stable policy environment and that certainty of the sorts of solutions that are going to need to implement in order to deliver on those challenges. And maybe we'll see some air source heat pumps installed. Who knows? You'll get your wish. Okay, brilliant. Right, well, I think, how are we doing on time? Yeah, I think we're going to have to wrap up, I'm afraid. Could keep going all day, I think. But I think it's really clear we have some big challenges still to address within the sector, but it's brilliant to be hearing about these solutions that are coming forward. We still have finance gaps, policy gaps, solutions gaps, but hopefully we're closing that implementation gap with some of the things that we've discussed here today. I'll just leave it to you three on the floor again for the same question as our friends earlier. Your one ask to this audience, to the policymakers over there, to your peers, to each other, to me. What would your one ask be, your one call to action that you'd like to leave us with today?
I'm holding the mic, so I'll start. I said this earlier, but I think what's really essential is that we have these technologies manufactured at scale, that the cost curves of being able to actually make these things affordable, make them accessible, comes from the mass production of them. And I think there's a lot of technologies that we're investing in that have not reached that commercial scale of production. So being able to really focus on finding ways that we can build up that manufacturing base to have it as affordable, not only in our own countries, but in those countries that are going to need it the most, being the ones that are doing the most new construction, so more sort of middle income and developing world. That's going to be an essential part of reaching our emissions targets.
Absolutely.
I have one request, basically, or more, but I'll just stick with one for now. When it comes to when you're designing a CapEx, or when you're looking at your financial model for the CapEx for retrofitting your assets, I would suggest that a percentage, more than 15%, should be allocated to innovation. And that should then include, well, innovation in its real sense, where you try and bring in new products, you test it on your buildings, you apply it, you see the difference, and after that, you share that experience with the industry. I think that is something we need to do. We need to allocate innovation for every project as a separate sort of fund or a separate, which can be rolled out, and you get to then experiment, you get to innovate and see the benefits, really.
And innovation is fun, let's be honest. So, and I think that would really help us with some of the barriers we were talking about earlier, so thank you for that.
So my final request is let's make energy efficiency sexy. No, and more seriously, we really need that. It's a call for policymakers really to really prioritise and focus on energy efficiency and really get that supportive, enabling policy environment in place. We heard on the last session about the EU Energy Efficiency Coalition. Was really looking to do that in the EU, and strong supporter of that. IIGCC is sitting on that, and we need more initiatives like that to really address those barriers and get that finance to scale and to move in the right places so that we can decarbonise our built environment.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much to everyone, to all of our speakers from today. I think there's enormous potential for us to activate, scale up and deploy some of these solutions, both in the markets where they were invented, to Peter's point, but also the enormous potential they have to support the entire world and the entire sector to decarbonize on its journey. So thank you very much to you guys. Thank you to everyone else. Please do come and speak to us if you'd like to know more. Thank you for your time today. Yes.